Okay guys, check this out. I am running our ADI framework in a context just like I did in previous episodes. We'll put Jim in as the worker, and that fires off a set of questions that are dependent on context. And so in this case, the logic checked that it was Jim that was logged in, and then it says, hey, here's some questions, and now we have this list dialog that we've created that has multiple choice in it. And of course, this is all table driven, and the survey was created by a regular user, not a programmer, and now they have the ability to create multiple choice questions. That's what we're doing today. I'm your host, Sean McKenzie. Thanks for joining once again on my channel on data engineering. In this episode, we go back to our application domain intelligence playlist with Microsoft Access, and we're going to take a look at how to make a list dialog. Now, a list dialog is a combination of a list box and a dialog box, and it allows you to basically stop processing while you choose something from a little pop-up list box. Now, if you've been following this series, you'll know that the ADI framework brings up a series of questions depending on answers that happened before in a sort of context-aware nature, and so we need to have a list box if we want to be able to do multiple choice questions. Now in this episode, we're going to create the list dialog box, and we're going to activate it inside of our ADI framework, and in the next episode we're going to do all the logic necessary to capture the responses from the list box so that we can change future logic that's dependent on it. Let's get to it. Want to disrupt unwanted RDP spamming against your remote desktop? Make sure to check out my BZ RDP cloaker. The link is in the description. Okay guys, this is a fun one today. We are going to be adding a list dialog box to our project, and here is the file that we're using. I will make this available on my downloads as well if you guys are interested, and we can get going here. So these are the objects that we've created so far. We have some forms there. We've got some modules here. There's an ADI module that has the framework logic. We've got some forms. There's a sort of master form, a parent form, and then some subforms that go on there. This is the ADI set form, and this is basically where you can go and create the nodes in your ADI set, and they can be just a few nodes for validation or training, or they can be part of a massive decision network for adaptive decision support systems. Now we can start this shift form. This is a simulation of some production system, and we created two buttons on this form where we can start our logic, and you can see it goes through, and it is context aware, so it knows that it's Jim that logged in, and Jim had different conditions that happen. But so far we only have input box questions or freeform and yes/no questions that we are able to put into our ADI set, and we would like to be able to have a multiple choice capability. And the place that we can do that is in our ADI prompt table. Now, as you're aware, if you've been following the previous episodes, our ADI prompt table is where we put our prompts. And so we're going to add a field in here to our ADI prompt table. We're going to call it prompt selections. It's going to be a long text, and we can close that and we can save it. And next what we can do is go down to our ADI prompt subform, and we're going to open that in design view, and we're going to add that prompt selections to this. Now this is a subform that's opened in datasheet view, so you can go to your form design and you can add existing fields if you didn't have it showing there, and then you can double click it or drag it onto your form from the available fields, and make sure that it's below the prompt text there, and that is going to put it in order. And so now we are going to have that datasheet view, and if I open the ADI set form, which has this subform as a subform on it, you can see now we've got this additional field at the end of our prompts there. And so that's really great. That's what we want to see, because now we're going to be able to create a new prompt type, and of course it's going to be in this drop down. We don't have it there just yet, but we're going to select it from that drop down, and then we're going to have a new way of creating a prompt where we can add whatever selections we want. And so here we go. We'll go back to the design of the subform. We're going to right click, go to properties of the drop down list, and we need to add that list dialog to our row source of our drop down list there, our combo box. You can see the row source has yes, no, and it has input box, and we'll add one more onto the end of that, and we'll call it our list box for now. And so it's going to be a list box selector, and so that's going to give us what we need. And of course the row source type is value list, and so we can save that and we'll close it. Now when we open our ADI set form, you can see now we have a selection called list box. And so let's go ahead and add one in there. We don't have the logic for it yet, and we don't even have a form, but we can go ahead and add one item to our test set here. And so we'll add a list box, item number 4, we'll call it breakfast, and we'll say, what did you have for breakfast? Something like that, something easy. So there we go. We can go bacon and eggs. We'll do pancakes. Let's do yogurt, and then we can do something simple like granola, I guess. So we'll put yogurt with fruit, and then granola. And so I'll put those in with, of course, the separator, the delimiter there, which is the semicolon, and we are good to go. So there we go. So now we have this prompt that we can put into our table, so you can add a whole bunch of prompts. So you really have a ton of flexibility when you're creating all of the nodes in your own set. Okay, and once we've done that, now we can go and we're going to make some changes to our ADI framework code, and that is in the ADI module that we created in a previous episode. After double clicking on that one, we get our Visual Basic for Applications IDE here, our editor, and you can see all the code here, and we're going to add some public variables here. Going to make it nice and simple, so we're just going to add public variables. So we're going to add one called ADI list caption, one called ADI list prompt, one called ADI list items, and of course we're going to have an ADI list selections, or ADI selections. And so you might be wondering, why are we doing this with public variables here? And the reason is that we need to have a dialog box that opens during processing. And in order for it to open and close during processing, we have to load some items before it opens and load some items during its closing process. Because as you know from previous episodes, the ADI logic keeps running until a stop condition is met. And so you could have several list box selections during that process that open and close. It's not like a regular form. Okay, so let's go and choose our do node function from the drop down there, and this will give you a good idea of what's happening during the processing of one node. And in that you can see that it evaluates prompts, and so we can go to that do prompt. We can select the do prompt subroutine from the list as well, and that's where we're going to make some changes. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add a string for our selections. And of course that is where we are going to store those delimited selections that we're going to get from the ADI prompt table. So you can see it selected there. We're getting the star from it. So that means we're getting all the fields from that table. And then we're opening that table in a record set. And then what we can do is we can add one more line where we're loading our variables up, and we can load our selections string with the prompt selections value that is in the table there. And I'm going to put a double quote concatenation. That's going to change it to a empty string if it is null. And then you can see down below here we've got a yes no type. So we're doing a select case. So we're saying, well, what's the type that was on that row? And is it a yes no? Is it an input box? and we're going to add one more case here, and the case is going to be a list box selection. And that's going to be a little bit different from the input box or yes no selection. And you can make a note. You can see that the processing of those selections stops in that first row with the variant return value equals input box, for example, for the message box. You can see that we're loading the message and the caption from our record, but everything stops until the user does something with that input box or yes no box. But we don't have that capability with a list box, because in this case it'll just open and then that'll be it. It won't continue processing unless we do a special kind of list box on a special kind of form. And so in order to do that, what we're going to do is, instead of putting the str message and caption into our input box selection as we do in that example, we're going to load up those public variables that we created in our ADI module, so that we can load those guys up with the selections that we have, and then open our dialog box. But of course we don't have a dialog box yet, so let's go build one. Okay, let's minimize our code window and go to the create ribbon, and we'll choose a new form design, and that's going to give us a nice blank form here that we can use to create a list dialog box. And it's going to be this modal pop-up box, and so it's going to be sort of skinny because it's going to be a pop-up and it's going to be a list. So we can go to form design, and we can we'll choose a label, and let's drop a label on there, and we'll put that at the top, and that's going to contain the prompt sort of text that is going to be associated with that particular prompt. And so we can change that to label prompt as a name in the other tab. That's going to make it nice and easy to refer to in our code. And then we can we'll grab a list box, and we can just drop a list box on here. I'll just drop it here, and it's going to be dynamically loaded with the selection. So if you get the wizard there, you can just cancel it, and there we go. We've got a list box on our form, and that's going to be good enough for now. You can do some sizing according to how you'd like to see that one, and we'll leave a bit of space at the bottom because we are going to put a button down there. We're going to have an OK button, and we can adjust our size and stuff. So let's make enough room for a button. We'll grab a button from the ribbon, and we can drop that onto our form here, and you can size that how you like. Again, if you get the wizard, you can just cancel it. We're going to be doing this one manually, and so we're going to have an OK button at the bottom of our list dialog here. So I'm going to call that button CMD OK, and that's going to give us a nice name to refer to in our code, and the caption will be OK. And so now we have an OK button. And what we can do is, for the moment, you can click on the Event tab, and then click on the ellipsis there, choose the code builder from the list, and you can see now we have some code that is available in a subroutine. And let's just put a doCommand.close on there for now. That's going to close the active object, which is the form, and we are good to go, because we want to have a close button, because we are going to disable a whole bunch of stuff on this form. Now we'll put something into the caption, but that caption is going to be replaced by the caption that's in our prompt record, and so we can set that. But we're also going to set a bunch of other things here. We're going to, no datasheet views. We're going to go down. We'll do an auto center. We want to do an auto center. We'll leave the resizing there. We're going to we'll take this. We want the thin border style, because this is going to be a modal pop-up, so we don't want to have those ridges around the outside of our form. And we'll do no record selectors, no navigation buttons, and we'll do no scroll bars, that type of stuff. And we can even get rid of the control box if we want. I'll leave the close button for now. You can say no to the close button now that we have an OK there. And we'll set the min-max to none. We're basically just making this form have no personality at all. It's going to be just a pop-up, and we want it to be a modal pop-up. And so let's hit save on that. We'll go ADI list. That's going to be the name of the form. And now we have a list box. Well, we have a list form. We don't have a list dialog yet because of course we're not opening it in the dialog mode, but we do have a form that opens, and you can see that it's sort of a good width for, that list box is a good width, but we don't want it to open, of course, in the form mode in the tabs. We want it to be a pop-up, so we're going to set that pop-up to yes. We'll set modal to yes, and those two selections are going to make a big difference here. So now if I open it in form view, you can see it pops up above, which is really nice, sort of above the screen, and it also doesn't allow the user to do anything else on the screen until they fix that. Now let's resize that a little bit, make it a little bit nicer. That left side of the list box is bugging me there, so I'm going to go fix that. And so now we've got this nice list box. Our OK button is at the bottom, and so users are going to get presented with whatever's in that ADI prompt row. And so now we've got a form with a list box, but of course we also want to name our list box. So let's go ahead and name our list box. So we'll click on the list box, go to the other tab, and we'll call this LBX select. We want to make sure we have a good name to refer to when we're doing our code, just like we have CMD OK there. And let's click on that CMD OK and click on the ellipsis, and now we can go ahead and take a look at the coding we're going to do here. So what the OK button is going to do is it's going to do some stuff when it opens. Now we're going to open it in a special way. I'll show you that in a moment. But once the form is open, all of the processing stops until the user makes a selection there. And so we can do, we're going to make sure that we have something there. So we'll do, if it's null for our selection there, for me, LBX select, then we'll give a message box saying please make a selection before continuing. We'll do information style with a select in the caption, and then we're going to exit that sub. So it's not going to continue on and do the processing if they haven't selected anything. And so now what we can do is, now we know there's a selection, so now we can go back to those public variables that we created in our ADI module, and we're going to set that ADI select in the ADI module. We're going to set that to whatever the user selected in the list box. And just going back to our ADI code here, our ADI module, that's that variable right there. We're going to fill that with the user selection. So you can see the pattern here. First, we're filling the caption, prompt, and items with the values from the table, and then we're going to open the form, and it's going to consume those, and then when it's done, it's going to put the ADI select. It's going to fill the selection with whatever the user selected. So you might be asking, well, how can we open the form so that it stops processing and then it doesn't do anything until it continues? So we're going to take a look at that now. So the first thing we need to do is load up what goes in the prompt, sort of text at the top there, and then what are the selections in the list. We need to get those values and load them up on the form when the form opens. And so how do we do that? Well, we can use the onOpen event of the form, and so we can click on the ellipsis beside that one. We can go to the code builder, and then we can use the form open event here, and we can go ahead and take a look here. So we can say it loads up our form. and we're going to do, of course, me caption. We can use the caption for the form is equal to the public variable ADI list caption, and the me the label prompt, and we can set the caption for that one equal to the ADI list prompt. That's going to be the prompt, the question to the user, what did you eat for breakfast this morning, or whatever. And then the me LBX select row source is going to be the list items, and that's going to be the semicolon separated list that comes from the same table that we just added that one to the table in this episode here. And so now we've loaded up all three of those things. So we're asking a question to the user, and the user looks at it, and when they're done, they make a selection, and then their selection goes into that public variable ADI select. And so by doing it this way, we now have a dynamic pop-up form that is modal, that stops the user, and it has a dynamic list. Now the list is in the data tab here. If you click on your list box and go to the data tab, we want to have a value list in there. Now you could also do this with a table that gets deleted and then filled up, and you load a table, but we're just going to use a simple value list this time. So let's go ahead and save that and close it, and we're good to go. Next, we're going to open up our IDE again, our Visual Basic that we minimized before, and we can go back to our do prompt subroutine again, and we're going to take a look at this list box selection, the list box case that we have started, and you can see we've loaded up the variables as the starting part of this block here, and now we're going to open that form. Now the form is not a dialog just yet. It's just a form that opens in modal view, and what we're going to do is we're going to open that form. We're going to say do command.open form ADI list AC normal, and then we're going to go down through the arguments here, and you can see after a few commas you can choose AC dialog, and that's going to change it to a dialog box, and that's going to give it some properties that we really like for doing this kind of operation. So that's our dialog box, and we can add commands before the dialog box opens, and we can add commands after the dialog box opens and closes. So all the dialog box has to do is open, do some stuff, and then close, and our logic is going to keep running regardless of what happens there. So we don't have to do all of that extra programming around opening and closing and then recontinuing whatever logic was there. All we have to do is say AC dialog, the form opens, when it closes it continues, and that's it. So that's awesome, we love that. And of course, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to add the selection that the user made. We're going to add that to our answer table, and so we're going to do that now. And just like for the cases for input box and yes no, we're going to do a with statement. We're going to do with rst add. We'll do .add new, and then we'll put in the username, the prompt, and the answer, and that's going to record the user's answer for that particular prompt, except this time we got the answer from a list box, and that's super cool. That gives us nice capability to use a list box in our framework, and we can use that add new. We're going to add that answer into the table. The ADI select is what was loaded during the time that the dialog form was open. So that's an important thing to notice, is that the processing stops while the form is open, and it doesn't continue until that form is closed. And that's the nice feature of the dialog, or the AC dialog argument, when you open a form. So now what we can do is we can do a debug compile just to make sure I didn't break anything massive in there like I usually do. Next, we can go back to the ADI set form that we opened in the beginning there, and you can see there's one of two contexts, or one of two sets. So if we go forward, it's the Candy Supervisor Survey, and that is on the second button. But if we go back one, this is our sort of our test set, and we have a start shift button and the test set is fired from that, and the survey is fired from the second set, which is the survey that we did in the previous episode. But here we are. So there is the list box that we created earlier in this episode, and we are expecting that to fire because you can have many prompts on one node. Now we're actually overloading that node. Typically you wouldn't have that many, but we'll go to our shift form and we'll hit start shift, and that'll fire that first ADI set. And of course it starts with a question, which we'll say yes to, and then we'll enter some stuff. It says please enter stuff, so we'll enter some stuff here. We'll hit OK, and that's going to take us to the next yes no question. And you remember the fourth one we created was the list box selection. Now you can see we've got bacon and eggs, pancakes, fruit, yogurt with fruit. We've got our header there, our caption, and all of the selections that we put in our list. We can hit OK, and that's going to be recorded what we selected, and then it continues on with the rest of the logic of that ADI set. And so that is basically complete. Now we have a multi-select option in our ADI set logic, or our framework logic, and we can have different kinds of answers. Now let's go to the end of our answer list and see if we got the data that we were expecting. So there we go. We've got our user. We entered some stuff. We said yes to a question there, and then we selected bacon and eggs. And then we selected yes on the next one. But there's our bacon and eggs. That is the multi-select that we created today. And that is exactly what we want to see. We can run through it again. We can say no. We can enter some different things in there if we want to, some random text, and we can hit OK on that, and then we'll get our Are You Feeling Great? And then our multi-select there. We can choose from the multi-select, and that's how you can do a list dialog with your ADI framework programming in Microsoft Access. Need time entry for your team out in the field? Make sure to check out my Bill Zone system. The link is in the description.